The board of the African Development Bank, AFDB, rose from its annual general meeting with some decision on financing Africa's COVID-19 recovery plan. And the upsurge of COVID-19 cases in some African countries, especially South Africa, is defying efforts at curtailing the spread. Now, these issues are our focus on this week's edition of the program. I am Joyce Ikogu, welcoming you to Africa Weekly. The AGM of the Africa Development Bank has come and gone. Now, this report highlights some major decisions reached at that meeting.
The African Development Bank Group is a financial institution established primarily to promote the social and economic development of the continent. The bank was founded in 1964 and comprises three entities: the African Development Bank, the African Development Fund, and the Nigeria Trust Fund. The bank's shareholders and officials from across the globe met in Abuja, Cote d'Ivoire last week for talks that centered around Africa's economic recovery and COVID response. Welcome to the 2021 annual meetings. Setting the tone for an ambitious week of talks, the bank's president, Akinwumi Adesina, brought to the four issues affecting the continent as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19.
Africa faced its worst economic recession in over 50 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, Africa's GDP declined by 2.1% in 2021.
The bank presented what it terms as the African Stability Mechanism with a liquidity and sustainability bailout facility to provide instant emergency funding to countries.
One potential area for high returns on investment is acting to lower what economists call trade costs, the costs associated with moving goods from the factory gate to the final consumer. This would raise the productive capacity of African economies, ultimately reducing real debt burdens, while helping build regional value chains and increasing the global competitiveness.
In Nigeria, we'll be making a lot of effort to, on a quarterly basis, disclose all the debts that we are borrowing and also to indicate what the debt service is.
Before the coronavirus pandemic, Africa was home to 6 of the fastest growing economies in the world. This changed as economies went into lockdown, travel was restricted, tourism dried up, while commodity prices plummeted because of weakened global demand for exports of oil, gas, and commodities.
Now, joining us via Zoom is Professor Oyelaran of the Africa Development Bank to discuss these issues. Many thanks for joining us on the program, Prof.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Now, one of the major fallout of the AFDB AGM was the talk about Africa's Stability Firewall. What is this about?
Thank you so much. The firewall is what we have called the Africa Financial Stability Mechanism.
Right.
It's a regional guarantee emergency support that will complement existing architecture, financing architecture, and to provide needed fiscal space for countries that are in distress, those who are falling into illiquidity, those who are insolvent, and to limit regional spillovers. It will protect the continent from financial crisis and help resolve those that have emerged already. So we are working, that is a complement to the global safety net that IMF already has. As we call it, the AFSM, the African Financial Stability Mechanism, is an idea that was proposed by Dr. Adesina and has now been agreed by all the key stakeholders, all the central bank governors of Africa, the global players.
Absolutely. Now, the AFDB is worried about the seemingly divide in COVID-19 recovery stimulus for the rich and poor countries. Why is this an issue?
Oh, yeah. Vaccine nationalism has been an issue for us. As you know, we have huge problems
Right.
in terms of health, the health metrics. Let me give you an example. Only 51% of public health facilities in Africa have basic water, sanitation, and electricity. Only 33% have care facilities.
Right.
Africa has 21% of hospital bed per density.
Right.
And what we find during this COVID is that suddenly we cannot even buy vaccines. As you see now, only 2% of all the global vaccines come to Africa. We have right now 200% more deaths after surgery than the global average. So apart from the vaccine, we have persistent health issues that is going to still be with us even after we have dealt with the pandemic as it is. So it's a big problem. We import virtually 90% of our drugs from India and China.
Right.
We import vaccines, which we are not getting now because other countries need their own vaccines. A lot of the big powers have vaccines. Some have 4 times what they need. So what the bank is proposing and what all the African heads of states are proposing, that we should have domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing in Africa.
Right. Now, Prof, the global financial architecture, which is not in favor of Africa continent, was also discussed. What is the AFDB pushing for?
No, this is one of the reasons, for example, for the Africa Financial Stability Mechanism. It's going to do a number of things for Africa. Number one is to support African countries with temporary balance of payments management. The second one, of course, is to help those who are illiquid and are probably going to insolvency, and also having the risk of debt distress, to give them favorable financial terms for specific fiscal activities in their country, infrastructure, right, and all of that. If we should recover and grow at a sustainable rate, as you know, growing at 2% might be a recovery from recession.
Right.
But Africa needs to grow at a higher rate if we are going to make a dent in the 30 billion people that have been falling into poverty. An estimated 39 million people will fall into poverty at the end of 2021.
Absolutely, Prof. Now, can you give us an insight into the planned $3 billion vaccine intervention for Africa?
Please, can you come again?
Can you give us an insight into the planned $3 billion vaccine intervention for Africa?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. So the bank is launching this $3 billion over the next 10 years for the health, what they call the health security for Africa.
Right.
The idea is to promote local domestic manufacturing pharmaceutical drugs, products in Africa. As you heard from me earlier, and as I'm sure you've learned now over this last couple of months,
yes,
having to import 90% of all your drugs, risk to the countries, is actually insecurity, the health insecurity. So what we are trying to do, and what the bank is trying to do, is to use this $3 billion to do several things.
Okay.
One is to support activities by all the other and the stakeholders like CDC. As you know, during the COVID, for example, the bank provided $28 million immediately to the Center for Disease Control for Africa. This will be building on it. We'll be having, for example, a foundation that will be engaged with technology transfer in the pharma area. One of the ideas of Dr. Adesina also.
Absolutely. Very well captured, Professor Oyelaran. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Yeah, we've been speaking with Professor Oyeyinka Oyelaran of the Africa Development Bank.